Fantastic. Thank you.
Good. Well, thanks for the more recent email. That's been very helpful, actually.
Yeah, I realized in watching some of the other videos that some of the other guests that you've had sent you detailed emails, and so I
Mm,
felt I would do the same.
mm.
Uh, I wasn't really sure what to share, so I shared everything that was present in that moment.
Great. Yeah, that's really good.
And the things have continued to unfold and deepen
Mm,
with the integration of it all. Uh,
good.
very, yeah, there's so many interesting things that are occurring, but I love what you shared about how things are inverted
Mm,
in the dualistic realm,
mm.
because it feels like that inversion is being undone. Uh,
Yes, definitely.
every little thing from grocery shopping to having a simple conversation with my wife to working in the hospital, all of it feels like it's being reverted, or
Yes.
the inversion is turning right side up again.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah.
Have you found some interesting things happening in your relationship? Because quite often with realization, the polarities which can be activated or the invitations which are being delivered between, say, husband and wife can fall away. So things can become more harmonious.
Oh, that's so true. Absolutely. That's so great that you mentioned that. Um, I notice so much spaciousness
Mm,
when my wife will share something. And the interesting thing is she'll share something about something that she's happy about, and
mm,
then another time might be she's sharing something about something that she's frustrated with,
mm,
and there's absolutely no difference.
mm.
Both are forms arising,
Yes.
and there's so much space around
Mm, mm,
any form of expression that she has. And there, I remember there's so many moments now where I can be with her and she shares what she shares, and I just smile because there's so much love present
mm.
for
Yes.
no reason.
Yes.
For,
Wonderful.
for no reason. And she could say something absolutely mundane about picking out the trash, or taking out the trash, and there's just a tremendous amount of love and
Mm.
spaciousness, just because.
Yes. Well, your experiences are very advanced, actually, Adam, especially you were saying about witnessing sleep, because that's something which isn't that common at the moment, really, but it's great that you have that experience.
Yes, yeah, it's so interesting. Well, I will say that your book, and maybe it would be helpful to share with you some background, just a little bit.
Mm,
Um, Many years ago, I was studying with a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, and
mm,
had probably my first glimpse into um, the fact that this idea of Adam is a total construct, and
mm.
there's no one actually here. It's just effortless
Oh,
being. I didn't
yes.
have the language to express what had happened to me, and
Mm,
then I noticed that there was a return back to the personality for
mm,
many years, and then there was some seeking and exploration of Advaita Vedanta, a lot of the work of Ramana Maharshi and all of that.
mm,
And then I really did a deep dive into A Course in Miracles and exploring some of its non-dual teachings. And then I had another episode or another experience of that sort of, I guess we can call it an awakening, but it felt like an opening,
mm,
an opening into what already always is.
mm.
And that's what it felt like. I remember that second time after doing this work with the Course in Miracles, it suddenly there was a realization of, oh, this has always been here. It's
Mm.
it's always been here, just sitting. And watching. And so there was that realization. Um, and then a few years later, my friend sent me, Stephen, who you'll meet soon, sent me a snapshot of a paragraph in your book,
Hmm.
which I had purchased a few weeks prior from the section Fear of Integration.
Oh.
And I read it, and in that moment, everything just fell away.
Mm.
All it felt like Adam became like paper mache.
Great.
Very, very flimsy, to the
Yes.
point that if I touched it, it just crumbled like ash.
Wow. Yeah.
And all that was left was this light. And looking back on it, it's so interesting how synchronistic everything was. My wife was working in an area in Central Coast in California, and I went to travel with her. It was sort of an away job. She's
Mm.
also an ICU physician,
Yes.
and I decided to make it a vacation for myself. While she was working for a week, I would just stay in the hotel.
Mm.
And actually, the first day in the hotel was when I read that paragraph in your book,
Hmm.
and Adam just fell away. And it was perfect because I didn't have anything to do that day. I was just in a
Mm.
hotel.
Mm.
And I recall sitting there looking at a beam of light coming from the window, reflecting off the surface of the table. And that moment was so rich.
Mm.
It
Mm.
was so, so rich. I just sat there and smiled, and it felt like everything was so full
Mm. Yes.
in that moment. And that I didn't need to do anything. I mean, really, it felt like Adam had vanished, and life was present.
Mm.
And that's all that there was.
Mm.
And so it was great because she would come back from work that evening, and we rested and slept, and she went back to work, and I just stayed looking at the light from the window for
Perfect
hours.
timing.
I did nothing for a week, and it was such perfect timing. It was such perfect timing because I don't think I could have gone to back to work
Mm.
in
Mm.
those first few days. I just needed to sit
Yes.
and do nothing.
Mm.
And to going back to your point, when I did go back to work um, later on, sometimes I do night shifts as an ICU doctor, and when it's not busy, I'll sometimes get a chance to rest
Mm.
in the call room.
Yes.
And I noticed a very fascinating phenomenon that I hadn't really experienced before. I started to I closed my eyes to sleep, and there was just effortless being
Mm.
present,
Mm.
and then there was noticing that the body was falling asleep,
Mm.
and then the body sort of felt like it was paralyzed and couldn't move, which
Mm.
I then the thought occurred, oh, this is sleep paralysis.
Mm.
And then there was noticing of shapes and colors coalescing in the darkness, and just pure effortless awareness of that. And then the shapes started to turn into very sharply contoured, colored images and buildings and people. And then I found myself in a marketplace, or
Oh,
a
yes.
full-on dream. And there was noticing of, oh my gosh, this is a dream.
I will.
This is a dream. And the dream was unfolding with absolutely no change in the effortless awareness. It was
Wonderful.
just noticing. And the fascinating thing was there was everything was so vivid. The
Mm.
dream was so, so vivid. And then I remember the nurse sent me a text, and there was buzzing, and the phone was next to me on the bed. and then the dream fell apart, and the body woke up, and I got up, I looked at the phone, and all of that happened in total effortless awareness. Like this
Yes.
aliveness was present and everything was happening inside of it.
Hmm. Fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
that's a lovely description, really, the way the dream manifested. So it went from being unmanifest and then into the basic structures, so into the forms and the colors. And the way you describe the transition from the sort of abstract nature of those forms into the forms which appeared as the dream then. So you saw the whole sequence. So that's great validation, really, of the witnessing quality because the transition from from the waking state into effortless being. Well, actually, it all took place within effortless being, really. But there's a kind of junction point between the waking state and the dream state, and then the dream state emerges. But you witness the whole sequence, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, I hadn't ever experienced that before. It was quite interesting, and it's happened since then
Mm,
several times.
mm,
I remember when I got back from a string of night shifts, coming back home and finally being able to have a proper rest and not be interrupted by the nurses. Um, the same thing happened again over the course of about 2 or 3 hours. And there
mm,
was noticing, and here's the interesting thing, that first night when I got back home, a, there was noticing of the dream shapes and forms. And the one interesting thing is, whenever it happens, it's always amorphous shapes and colors that tend to slowly start to coalesce. And when
mm,
they do, there's such a sharpness to the images. They're so bright and sharply contoured.
mm,
I There's a noticing of a pull
mm.
into the into whatever shapes are forming and into the story of the dream.
Yes.
Uh, and then in that case, that dream faded away. Everything turned gray and then
Mm,
went to sort of a void. And in that void was just pure awareness.
mm.
No
Yes.
atom, no story, no dreams,
Yes.
just awareness and an empty void.
Mm,
And I can't quite tell how much time passed, but I noticed the shapes and colors started to return.
mm,
And then more dreaming
mm.
occurred.
Yes.
And when the body woke up, apparently 3 hours had passed.
Well,
So, so I noticed that it's sort of like an undulation of forms
yeah.
arise, forms fade, forms
Yes.
arise, and forms fade. And my first feeling the first thought that occurred was, am I not going to sleep ever again? Because it felt like I wasn't sleeping like I'm used to.
Yes.
But there was what I noticed the next that day. I there wasn't fatigue or
No.
tiredness, so I
Mm.
assumed that the body rested,
Yes. Well,
and that's
the
it.
fluctuations tend to be, um, well, I'm sure you know this yourself, actually, but really, as the body goes into more deep rest, it goes into attributeless awareness. So it's just awareness aware of itself. And the deep sleep state. So that's when it's most restful. And then as there's some recovery, then dreams can emerge again because there's a certain degree of rest that's been attained, and then there can be the arising of the dreams. And then where there's requirement for more rest, then it's back to well just awareness aware of itself really. So it's great to witness the whole thing though. That's but I know it's in some ways there is that feeling. It's very exciting in one way, but sometimes there's a feeling, oh, I'd just like to be completely out of it. So
Yes, 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 it's true. And since then, I have had normal
mm, good.
nights
Yeah.
where there's just for lack of a better word, unconsciousness,
Yes.
and then there's awaking. And yeah, but it's that was a very interesting. That is why I felt to email that to you because it was a very striking experience.
Yes. Well,
Very-
because you've had much clarity in the experiences in effortless being, and well, we can have a chat about unity consciousness in a moment too. But I think because there's been a lot of clarity, then it found its way into the dream state, and so that's really inspiring, though. Did you feel any lucidity? Did you feel that there was the option to direct the dream in some way?
Yeah. So when I was younger in college, I actually studied lucid dreaming
Mm,
and really trained myself to have that lucidity
mm,
and direct the dream. And so
yes.
I have had those experiences. I
Mm,
dropped that practice a while ago, just because there's no other, um, there wasn't any interest in it anymore.
mm, yeah.
But this felt different
Mm,
in that I guess there was no desire to, or the thought never
yes.
occurred to.
Yes.
I think what I was struck by was just um, not quite the word fascination, but there was such a resting in the noticing, if you
Yes.
will. And it's funny, I keep doing this because it sort of feels like it's
It's
always here.
field. Yeah, exactly. Well, I was interesting to ask that question because um, there's a principle of individuation which is called ahamkara, and we can experience the waking state and the dream state either side of that. So, what was really predominating for you in the dream state was unity. So it was there was a field of effortless awareness. So individuation wasn't predominating in the dream, because we need to for there to be lucidity, we really need to show up as a character in some way.
That's a fascinating point. Yeah, it felt like the entire dream was like objects in a landscape. There
Mm,
was no draw to interact with
mm,
any of it. It was
yeah,
just like looking at a painting on a wall.
mm,
There was just noticing
that's
that.
it. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a much deeper level. That's great, Adam.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, do you feel you can switch between the personal mode into unity consciousness at will? Do you feel that that is available to you?
You know, David, that's so interesting. What I've been noticing is, well, one of your videos had that, I think you were speaking to a gentleman with a fan near him, and you were inviting him to listen effortlessly, effortlessly allow the awareness of the fan,
Mm,
and then to start to label it and identify it and
mm,
enter the personal mode.
mm.
And I really found that a helpful practice because it's almost like doing that accentuates
Yes.
effortless awareness. The contrast
Yeah.
um, makes it pop, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and then that said, what I've noticed, and this happens a lot with my wife, when we have conversations and we need to plan for things like pay the bills or grocery shopping or this and that, I notice words just come.
Mm. Yes, you mentioned that actually in your email. That's yeah, that's amazing. And well, the sequence of everything you mentioned, even at work, what needs to be done, what needs to be said, or just
Yes.
effortlessly.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Oh, that's something I wanted to share with you, David. It's such a cool experience. So, one of the things that I do as an ICU doctor is something called rounding.
Mm,
And what that means is in the morning, let's say I have 10 patients or so, me, the charge nurse or the head nurse,
mm,
a pharmacist, and maybe some of the trainees, maybe residents or junior doctors.
mm,
are all in a group, and we go to each room and we
mm,
discuss the patient.
mm,
And the junior doctor will present, and the nurse will maybe share some key lab values that are relevant. And my job essentially is to offer the plan of the day based on all of that information.
mm,
And in the past, it very much felt like I, Adam, was making the decision for the day
mm.
about the patient. And um, I almost had to, I had a smirk on my face almost the entire first day back in the ICU because the nurse would say something about a lab value, and there was noticing of the mind drawing upon past memories of
Mm.
previous experiences or books, or and the information would be readily available. And I noticed my mouth saying, okay, let's do this, this, and this.
Mm.
And none of it was me.
Fantastic.
None of it.
Yes.
It's like I was watching a movie of an ICU doctor doing his job, but I wasn't doing it anymore.
That's great fun.
It was so cool. There was a thought that popped up, a momentary invitation of fear, like it felt like a car was on a road and I wasn't holding the steering wheel anymore.
Mm.
And it
Yeah.
felt like it was just driving itself.
Mm. Mm.
And it almost felt strange not to have a steering wheel to hold on to
Mm.
and notice that the driving was just happening. And there's a lot of life has slowly felt that way.
Mm.
It's driving itself,
Mm.
which is
It's yeah, well,
funny.
it's a great option, and I'm sure for you the ability to experience anywhere really between effortless being and fully activating the personal mode will be available to you. You can activate each of those experiences at will, really. It's just that we tend to we tend to have been conditioned into individuality, and then sometimes if they're experiences of effortless being, we don't seem to be able to experience them consciously. They sort of come and go as glimpses and that kind of thing. But for you, because you're experiencing the whole range, you'll find you'll be able to decide how you wish to experience. So it can be anywhere between. So it can be on autopilot or it can be some engagement.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, autopilot. It makes me
Mm.
think of the self-driving cars now.
Yes.
You sort of input your destination and the cars
Yeah.
just
Take you
take
there.
take you there. Yeah. Which is interesting though. I do notice that there are it's not quite clear to me yet where this is coming from, but there are preferences for where how life unfolds.
Yes.
Um, and I guess there's just noticing that that preference exists.
Yes.
And like we went just this morning. I went to have coffee with my wife, and I noticed I prefer to go to this specific coffee shop.
Mm.
And I made the decision to go there,
Yeah.
which was interesting because I think in the past there would have been, I should say, in the first few days of this sort of awareness, there would have been zero desire for anything.
Mm. Yes.
But now there's noticing that there are preferences.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. Well, that's integration, really. That's integration of the personal mode into effortless being, or you could say it the other way around, really. But yeah, that there can still be effortless being even when the preferences of the personal mode are being activated. So it's yeah, that's great. Do you have any experiences of unity with your wife? Do you find that you're just resting as a field of awareness and then both voices are speaking and there are the two forms sat there and and then there's just universal awareness of the whole experience?
Yes, I smile because that happened yesterday. Um, my wife and I we went driving through the countryside, and there was a long period of time where we weren't saying anything,
Mm,
and there was just effortless being.
mm.
And this is interesting. Driving is amazing.
Good opportunity, isn't it? Yeah, it is.
Driving is fascinating.
Mm,
And just noticing the body, there's a body driving a car.
mm, mm.
And and then so yesterday there was this body driving a car, silence in the car. Then my wife said something, and those words just sort of echoed in the space of effortless awareness. And then
Mm,
there was noticing that I said something, and all
mm,
of it was just the shapes and forms of
mm,
effortless being.
mm.
And the fascinating thing is just to see how the the sounds are just as much objects in the landscape as the colors that I
Yeah.
see.
Mm, mm.
And now it's starting, what I'm noticing is thoughts and feelings are also objects that arise in
Yes.
in that same space.
Yeah.
There is a qualitative difference to feelings. I notice there's something different about how feelings arise in the space of effortless awareness than thoughts or sounds. But they all do feel like it's all arising form.
Yes. Yeah.
And
That's great, actually. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, another fascinating thing. I shared this with my friend. I like to run every now and then.
Mm.
Um, and I went running. This was several weeks ago. I went for a run. Oh, David, running is amazing. Running,
For
actually,
witnessing.
so many things are just so rich, but
Mm,
running is amazing because when I'm running, there's this vastness, and the body seems to be doing its thing, and there's an intelligence that keeps the body running, and I'm not running anymore.
mm, mm,
And so I noticed running, and there feels like there seems to be a perfection about everything.
mm.
And at one point, I was turning a curve, and my left foot slipped and fell, and my whole body fell and hit on the left. And I got up and I went back to running. And the strangest thing was the fall felt perfect.
Wow.
It felt absolutely like it was supposed to happen.
Wow.
There's this strange feeling of
Mm,
the running was perfect. The way my foot turned and slipped was perfect.
mm,
The way the
mm,
body fell was perfect. And then
mm,
getting like everything just did not miss a beat. Like it was a chorus in a song. It was supposed to be there.
mm.
It was this fascinating feeling of everything occurring is absolute perfection.
That's fantastic, actually. Yeah. You're getting to witness things in, it's almost like slow motion.
Yeah. Yeah, slow mo exactly, exactly. It is this feeling like that was, and then later on I've had so many interesting experiences with running. Um there was another experience when I was running, and there's just this effortless, there's this movement happening, and I felt wind blowing, and the wind felt like me.
Mm,
And then I look over and I see a grove of trees moving in that wind, and there was this feeling like the trees were aware
mm,
of this body running, and then this body running was aware of the trees, and there was just like this rippling of awareness. And underneath it all, or sort of mixed, it is a very strange feeling. It felt like the wind itself was aware,
mm,
and the wind was joyful.
mm.
And
Yes.
and it felt like every time my foot hit the ground was joyful and aware, and it just felt like being surrounded by a joyful awareness. The whole thing just felt like the the body was buoyed along for
Mm,
the run.
mm.
Quite a it's almost like the joy was so rich.
Yes.
It felt like it could have kept going.
Mm. Well, that sequence arises in effortless being because the conditioning we've had has been to direct us towards the mind and the emotions. But when effortless being is stabilized, then it begins with neutrality, and then it goes into more heightened experiences in the ways you described. So there's clarity, there can be a feeling of effortlessness, of witnessing, and then the forms become sharper, and it's moving. So it's moving, or there's an enhanced sense of unity. So you're seeing everything not just from the perspective of Adam, but from the perspective of the wind and the trees and the ground. And yeah, it's that's great. That's very advanced, really.
I wanted to ask you about invitations.
Mm,
So I have noticed invitations arise since this experience in the Central Coast
mm,
of California. And what I've noticed is so there's I love how you say it declining invitations. There's been sort of a spectrum I've noticed of invitations. There are some invitations that arise where it does very much feel like, especially the stronger ones, that there's a declining that occurs of the
mm,
invitation. I've also noticed sometimes invitations arise and they seem to vanish on their
mm,
own.
mm. Good.
And it's sort of like I love this analogy of ash. It sort of feels like it's like the remnants of a piece of wood, but it's turned totally into ash,
Yes.
but it still looks like a log.
Yes.
But as soon as it's interacted with in any way, like just the
Mm,
slightest touch, the whole thing just collapses. A lot of my invitations that are a lot of the invitations that arise seem to be like that ash log,
yes.
where as soon as I touch the invitation, the whatever contraction was there, whatever tension was related to the invitation, just sort of.
Yeah, that's brilliant because it just shows how the power of consciousness really can just dissolve the invitations because when there's a degree of personalization, then they can be delivered. And if there's a possibility of inviting us in, so we're going to be investing in them energetically, then they can still appear. But um, it really just shows that the dualistic realm has kind of surrendered. It's just saying, well, there's no point really in delivering these, so they just kind of disappear. So that's that very powerful transformation, really.
Your your suggestion on one of the calls, or maybe it might have been this recent group call,
Mm.
to be aware of the themes of the invitations. I forget
Yeah.
exactly what you said, but
Mm.
um, that I highly recommend that. I think that is such a helpful thing. What I noticed is that same day I took out a journal, which journaling also has been a great
Mm.
tool.
Yes. Mm.
Uh, I wrote down all of the invitations that I notice,
Mm.
um, and there seems to be a group of them, maybe about four or five very common ones
Mm.
that keep occurring in variations. And
Yes.
and I've noticed that as soon as ever since having written them down, now whenever they occur, there's a recognition of, oh, that's the one
Yes.
that I wrote down. And so there's absolutely no need to do anything with the invitation.
Yes.
It's almost like an instant declination
Yes.
because there's recognition of that's just the dualistic server serving up of the same invitation that I've noticed so many
Yes.
times.
Fantastic. That's a real shortcut, actually, isn't it? And it does bring it into clarity. And yeah, I really like that idea, actually, the journaling, because it is an easy way, a bit because sometimes if we're not so attentive, or for some people there are maybe two or three predominant invitations. For most of us, it is sort of maybe four, five, six. But yeah, it sort of it just enables them to be seen as they're arising, and we can just feel the energy, and then we know what it is, and then we just know we're not going to take delivery of it. So it's a really economical way of dealing with them.
Yeah, it's so interesting. They, it is so interesting how ingenious the
Yeah.
invitations can be, and unique. I so appreciated the way you spoke about both the dualistic central server having an intelligence without love,
Mm,
and how there is also another intelligence that does have love, a
mm,
loving intelligence or a loving infinite intelligence, um, and how the dualistic central server knows everything about you.
mm.
So it will serve invitations that are um, like tailor-made,
They are very specific, yeah.
tailor-made to you.
That's really how ingenious it is because we can't initially accept that the dualistic realm could know that much about us. It seems as though only we could ha hold that information.
Yeah, yeah. What I'm noticing though is for the vast majority of those tailor-made invitations, writing, that's why I felt writing them down is so helpful because the recognition of them becomes very easy.
Mm.
And it's almost like I don't have to go into sorting out whether this invitation is something that I need to accept or decline, which is, I
Yes.
think, the mind in the past would have needed to sort it out,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like, let me just figure this out a little. Let me
Sure.
go into it and triage it, if you will, to use a
Mm.
medical term. Um, but now with the instant recognition, it's like, oh yeah, I know that one. It's
Mm.
that's a common one, and then it's just like, no, thank you,
Fantastic.
and then it goes away. So yes, the other thing that I've noticed quite a bit is there's it's always now.
Mm.
It feels like I'm always there's only this.
Yes.
I feel like language is failing me now, but the feeling is I used to feel like I was in the past
Mm.
or worrying about the future.
Mm.
There was a lot of being anywhere other than now,
Yes.
and there's a striking quality to life these days, which is that there's only now.
Mm. Mm.
And it any thoughts about the future feel like they are here. They're the
Yes.
thought of the future is happening right now.
Yes.
So it's just noticing how much of my life in the past had been lived elsewhere in the
Mm.
mind.
Mm. Yes. And also really just seeing that the thoughts of the future lose their gravity in a way because there's a sense of ease and the distinction you've made between the two kinds of intelligence, you realize that the intelligence, which is a combination of intelligence and love, will actually take care of the future for you. So you
Yeah.
probably found that the quality of the days and the way things are experiencing, well, you alluded to this certainly in the email, but you find that the structure of the days, it's being taken care of. So previously there was a sense of personalization and authorship, but then you find it just goes by itself, and the less we're sort of projecting any sense of personalization, everything just works, as you say, perfectly, even well, the way you described it with the running. And that just brings a relaxation in because well, we see that in a way, the way we were conditioned into interacting with the dualistic mode was counterproductive in a way because it was setting the basis for us to have experiences where we're invited into things like fear or anxiety about the future. But then gradually you see that we're just resting as effortless being. We're not activating those frequencies. and then we're not experiencing any kind of anxiety or fear, and even events which are appearing, they don't have the capacity to trigger those kind of experiences. So it just becomes really quite magical.
Yeah, that's a good word, magical. And I like that word relaxation too. It's felt very relaxing
Hmm. Hmm.
knowing that the future takes care of itself.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's fascinating, really, and also you find that um, your true purpose really is able to emerge much more powerfully because the personalization in some way was well, we were kind of diverting a degree of energy into the dualistic realm, which could have been in full alignment with your infinite nature. When it is, it's just much clearer. And the way you describe experiences, that sort of crystal clear quality to the experiences, is something which is due to withdrawing the investment from the dualistic realm. So the clarity in effortless being is just available. So the thoughts, the emotions, the perceptions, they just have this clarity about them.
It's true. Yeah. Yes, it's very true. The clarity is um that's a big quality and brightness too.
Mm,
Everything seems brighter.
yes.
Uh
Mm,
not it's hard to describe it exactly, but it's almost like the effortless awareness itself has a brightness to it.
yes. It is. It's self-illuminating, really. It's
Yeah, that's a good word. Yeah, yeah, it's self-illuminating.
Mm,
It is interesting. There's a brightness to it.
mm. It's amazing the way the way consciousness is evolving because the clarity that's come to you. In a way, I feel that even the experiences you had, when you were becoming familiar with lucid dreaming, on some level has been beneficial. The things that the clarity, and also your career as well. But because you're seeing things in a way where you're understanding the structures, and I think all of that has made it easier for you because you're seeing the different aspects of experience in a way where the clarity has just emerged, very easily. And because you're young as well, there hasn't been an experience of years of suffering really. So the invitations haven't really had the opportunity to become too established.
Yeah, it is true. You've shared that before to some of the other folks you've been with about how everything in the personality story leading up to awakening was perfect
Yes,
in that it allowed for well, it's hard to say in that it allowed for the awakening, but it does seem to be related somehow.
yes. Can you look back and see how the sequence has been perfect? That really it couldn't have been any other way. It's just like it's just gone from one thing to another, and it seemed as though it was you doing it, but then you look back and you realize it was just revealed to you in some way.
Yeah, that's a trip. It is it does feel like it felt I go back to the memory of it and it I do recall feeling like there was an I doing things and striving and seeking.
Mm,
Um, and now I look back and I look at it all as a an unfolding
mm,
that
mm,
happened perfectly. I guess it's like the fall during my run. I
mm,
might have labeled something as wrong,
mm.
but actually it was perfect
Yeah.
in how it unfolded.
Mm,
Yeah, it is very interesting. I so appreciate the words that you give to this and the languaging of it. Um, I remember reading some books from I think you called it the Neo-Advaita
yeah.
movement, and there's such a strictness in being absolute about describing
Mm,
things, and
mm,
I really appreciate how you bring love and compassion into a lot of this because I do recall moments where there was a lot of suffering for me in the past, and when I see others suffer, there's there's an arising of love and compassion for them because it's
Mm.
there's a memory of that
Yes.
struggle
Mm.
and knowing what that feels like. And I feel like being absolutist in some of the non-dual statements doesn't feel very kind
No.
or doesn't feel loving. And you made a comment to this to that effect to someone else, and I really appreciated that because um, in this space of awareness, there does appear to be love and compassion that arises. And interesting and a desire, and this happens often with my patients when I notice there's suffering.
Mm.
um, I find myself um, it's interesting there the field of awareness seems to be filled with love for the patient.
Yes.
There's a richness that happens. Like I remember sitting next to one of my patients after doing the rounds and just letting them share um, the struggles that they're going through and the pain that they're experiencing. And I didn't have to say very much. In fact, I don't recall really saying very much to them at that time. But I do recall being in the space of effortless awareness and noticing a tremendous amount of love
Yes. Mm.
in their sharing.
And also, what you'll find is that the experience you described, where the invitations turn to ash, because you're holding the space of effortless awareness, then when your patients describing their experience and expressing the way things are for them, they also will be burned to ash because that's the benefit really, is showing up as effortless being rather than showing up as the person, because they
Yeah,
just dissolve really. And that, that's something. It isn't something obviously on a personal level, but there is, because everyone is the infinite being. But it's it's almost, you're like a lighthouse of unity within a sea of duality. And so it's something which, even if people don't have an understanding of anything to do with, the structure of consciousness, then it still functions in that way. That's how there is realization, because it is the one field. It's the morphogenetic field, and it's activated, and then everyone is experiencing from that field, even if there's some degree of investment in duality.
it's true. Yeah, yeah. The whole
So
thing is fascinating.
it'll be fascinating to see how things develop for you, Adam, because, specifically with your career and the clarity you have, just to see how um, lots of it will take place energetically. It won't really be on a conceptual level, but you'll definitely notice um, the quality that can be brought to all the relationships, because you're really bringing unity, so that you're holding your patients within unity consciousness. And that's quite rare at the moment.
Yeah. I find myself talking less.
Mm, mm, mm.
I mean, I'm talking a lot with you right now.
Sure.
But I do on average talk less, and I notice less, even less so with my patients.
Mm, mm.
Um, is sitting down with them and having them share what they're going through. I mean, I'll usually for most patients ask, well, tell me what brought you to the hospital if they're able to talk. Sometimes they can't, and and I notice the space of listening is quite rich. It's quite
Yes,
full.
yes.
Quite full. There's such
Mm,
an immediacy to everything. Um,
yeah,
like when the patient is sharing what's going on, there's total um, emptiness in the mind, total stillness,
yes.
but the moment itself is quite rich and full.
Mm, mm,
And when the sharing arises, and I notice there's a lot of that. There's been a lot of stillness as I listen.
mm. And do you find that the solutions required, they just kind of appear to you, that maybe they ask you a question and the solution just appears and
Yeah. Yeah,
no,
that happens quite often that and it makes me in a certain way quite grateful for having studied because I notice the thoughts, the solutions, or the next steps, like the medications that are needed, or this and that, seem to arise effortlessly in the mind. And I'm
mm,
grateful because I don't think they would arise if I hadn't done the studying that I did in the
yeah,
past.
yes.
It's
It-
all sort of stored somewhere
yeah,
back there.
yeah, exactly. It's a great combination, though, isn't it? Because effortless being can draw, because effortless being is an infinite field of awareness. So everything is accessible there. So whether it's the mind, the emotions, or the physical realm, so it can draw on any aspect. And the all the knowledge that you have in terms of your career, it can combine that with the intuitive capability of effortless being, which is a great combination, really.
I wanted to ask you, so we spoke a little bit about the intelligence of the dualistic central server, which by the way, I really appreciate you use the word demiurge. I
Mm,
think this idea of this Gnostic expression that you used of that there's some intelligence which whose purpose it is to sustain the dream, to sustain the dream of individuality by having an energetic investment.
mm,
I've never I
mm.
think the only time I've really heard that was in A Course in Miracles, but you use a different language to it, which I very appreciate because it makes me think about the movie The Matrix
Mm.
and and being batteries for a larger intelligence.
Yes,
And I wanted to ask you, could you speak more to the intelligence that is loving, the infinite intelligence? Because I notice when when I let go, and as we talked about, the future sort of takes care of itself. Like somehow life unfolds exactly the way it needs to
yes,
in a loving way. There seems to be a very profound intelligence there, and
definitely.
in somehow negotiating the lives of many human beings, sort of like a conductor of a huge orchestra.
Yes.
Everything is happening so beautifully synchronized, like me having a week off in the hotel at the same time that this awakening occurred
Yes. On the first day.
on the first day. And my
Mm,
wife never really does these away um, trips. She always
mm,
likes to work at one hospital. And this was a very unique situation where she had to travel, and I happened to be off the same week that she was off. Everything was just such synchronicity. So I was hoping you could share a little bit more of where. What is that intelligence? Where does it come from? How does it know? How is it orchestrating all of this?
well, that really is the supreme intelligence, which, you could say is the intelligence of God, because it's the combination of infinite love with infinite intelligence. Thing to know with the dualistic realm is whatever the structures are, even though they can appear to be limited, say the invitations, the invitations are they're sort of devised by the dualistic central server, but there's always an aspect to them which is in relation to one's infinite potential. So if you take certain experiences, there can be an experience which well, every experience can be interpreted or experienced either in terms of duality or in terms of unity. But unity is really always predominating. So if you take certain experiences of limitation, um, you find, for instance, that the more challenging experiences in life, in a dualistic sense, they can give rise to things like fear and anxiety and limitation. But they can also be really liberating. And so you find that whatever experience we're having can either be interpreted in a dualistic sense which is to do with limitation and contraction, or in terms of unity, which is in terms of expansion and infinite possibilities. And so the more we become aware of that, then we can see that um, in a way, the most challenging experiences are the ones where there's the greatest gift, because the purpose of them ultimately is for us to realign with impersonal being. Because where there's overinvestment in the personal realm, then there can be a restoration of intelligence which comes through from the infinite being, which realigns. So if there's too much of an investment, say, in the material aspect or in a materialistic aspect of life, then there can be a reset sometimes, which, from the point of view of duality, it can seem quite painful. So if somebody, if they experience loss or bankruptcy or those kind of things, it can seem really challenging. But it actually only destroys the dualistic construct, the personalization. So it takes us back to impersonal being, and that's really of the greatest value. So you find, lots of people say that the challenges in life can be the most rewarding in some ways, and that ultimately is true, because everything everything in the personal realm and the dualistic realm is only like a virtual reality matrix. So we're having the full-on experience. So the components of the dualistic realm, things like, death, sickness, old age, suffering, all the invitations, um, they, they can be very intense if there's identification with the personal mode. But fortunately, the way consciousness has evolved is there's a point now at which we can see the structures of the dualistic realm. We can see what they're actually designed to do, and we can look at them from the perspective of unity. So so what previously seemed really scary, we can just see it as a device within like a computer game. The purpose of death is to give rise to things like fear, uncertainty, anxiety, and it's just like a little device in the game in one way, because it isn't ultimately true. And then you realize that the option to actually remain in the sovereignty of impersonal being is always there. Whatever's going on in the personal realm, there is always the option to revert to impersonal being. So we can regulate the degree of investment in the personal realm, and we can be selective. So anything which is to do with enrichment, the way you've described your experiences, the elements of enrichment and clarity, because the dualistic realm has been turned off, because you have seen the dualistic realm for what it is. You kind of totally withdrawn the investment from the dualistic realm, and it's just turning to ash before your eyes.
That's such a good, the ash metaphor works so well for me. Because
Yeah.
on one end, on one side, it looks real. It looks like it has shape and form and density and
Yes.
heft. But
Yes.
any sort of testing of it
Mm.
reveals that there's nothing there. It's
Yeah.
just air.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing the way consciousness is evolving, really, because the conversation we're having is it, the conversation seemed to evolve somehow, and there isn't any effort involved in that. But it's just that the cognitions that people are having, they're sort of, it's like a baton that people are carrying, and then we sort of pass it to each other, and
Yeah.
it's advancing. It's amazing, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm grateful to you. A lot of this baton passing was initiated by you, I guess, in a way. Yeah, it's
Well,
quite,
it's just we can't take credit though. That's, it's very interesting. In a way, it's really liberating not to be able to take credit because it's much more fun then because we're watching it. It's much more fun to observe it and witness it rather than take authorship for anything.
it's true. Yeah, yeah, in a sense it's that unfolding directed by the loving intelligence.
Mm,
It's the
mm,
orchestra
mm,
playing. Yeah,
mm,
it's wonderful. I really appreciate the this notion of the two intelligences and how you said realigning with impersonal being. To me, it seems like a lot of a lot of there seems to be spiritual growth before awakening and then spiritual growth after awakening,
mm.
and
Yeah.
perhaps the term for that is integration.
Yes. Yeah,
But
exactly. Yes.
post awakening integration seems a lot to be about realigning with impersonal being, noticing
Yeah.
invitations, uh,
Yes.
releasing them. Sometimes it seems like they, as we talked about, they vanish on their own,
Mm.
which is fascinating to watch. And other times it does feel like they are released.
Yes.
And that reminds me of actually ever since it was one of your videos where you talked about Lester Levinson,
Mm.
and I had never heard of him until your video, and I went out and read his autobiography of a master
Mm.
of an American master. It's his one of his first books, and
Mm.
he uses that word releasing a lot. And
Yes.
I imagine I wanted to ask you, was that what he was doing? Was he declining invitations and releasing them? Because he talks a lot about releasing subconscious programming,
Mm.
and it seems awfully similar to this idea of when the invitation arises, just you choose not to engage with it.
Yeah, well, I think with Leicester, um, well, with each of us actually, what you see is that the self is revealing itself to itself. So there's a process taking place, and it appears to be over a period of time, and it's kind of incremental. So the infinite self is only releasing certain things at certain times. So I think with Leicester, um, his the way he describes releasing, a lot of people don't actually find it to be that beneficial because on some level, it's actually maintaining personalization. It's the idea that we have these subconscious programs, which are, as a result of trauma and various things, and we need to release them. And then when we release them all, then there'll be realization. But what's become clear is that when we're actually resting as impersonal being, which is all we can ever be, then we can't actually adopt the content of the mind and the emotions on a personal level because that is we have to adopt personalization before we can say, oh, we're carrying these subconscious programs
Yeah.
because really they're only invitations. They're that it's just there have been tendencies to take delivery of certain invitations, and those tendencies can exist within family lines. So you find that, maybe your mum or dad, had a tendency to take delivery of particular invitations. So it seems as though we're carrying it personally, but we're not. Actually, everyone is remaining as the pristine, infinite being all along. We can't be anything other than that, but we can opt for experiences in the personal mode or the dualistic mode. But for there to be the idea of releasing, we have to consent to the idea of personalization and consent to the idea that we're actually carrying all of this baggage that we need to release at some point. But play in a way where the infinite being is it's only revealing a certain amount of information and but it's revealing itself to itself. My personal view with Lester, is that we we each have different kind of influences. You know, you can determine some of these through things like astrology, but my feeling is that Lester had there was a period of time where he was able to access a level of will which was really where there was full alignment with his infinite impersonal nature. So what he's describing as releasing on a personal level was really due to alignment with his infinite nature. So there was alignment with his infinite nature, and he's describing this process as though it was taking place personally, when really it was all taking place impersonally.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, which explains the effortlessness of it. He
Yes,
alludes to that, if I'm correct, to how rapidly it happened, and it
yes,
certainly sounds like the effortlessness that occurs in impersonal being.
yes. Well, he reached a point where um, you could say it was massive overinvestment in personalization.
Yeah.
You know, in the earlier part of his life, where he was very ambitious and but then he was experiencing everything personally, which resulted in mental, emotional, and physical distortions and imbalances. You know, and he had heart issues and all kinds of things. But there was the ability to realign with impersonal, effortless awareness, and then the level of will and sovereignty which exists within one's infinite nature that became available to him. And so it all actually took place in impersonal, effortless awareness. But um, the sequence, because the infinite being, it's like a movie that we're experiencing where there's a process of integration of unity consciousness into the dualistic realm. That's like the theme of the movie in a way. And so it isn't going to reveal everything. It's like reading a book and then you go to the last few pages to see what happened. But the movie won't permit that. It only allows certain things at certain points, and you can see the sequence. I've noticed over the 20 years I've been having conversations that that's exactly what's happening. And it's evident in the conversations and it's evident in the sequence of the conversations as well.
That's why do you suppose that is?
Well,
Time.
ultimately, because it's all for entertainment, I feel it's all like cosmic entertainment. So
Yeah.
it's a multi-dimensional experience of infinite potential, and it's functioning on so many different levels. But it's just, as you say, it's really rich. And you've described some of the versions, you know, where there's the possibility to witness, there's the possibility to experience the forms emerging in terms of the sort of abstract qualities, where they're emerging from either the astral or the etheric realm, and you're cognizing those and experiencing them, and then they emerge into form, and then there's a combination of the mental, emotional, and physical realms combined. But the yeah the way that the infinite being is revealing it's quite liberating to see that it's all being guided, you know, in the way when you were having the run, you know, and even having a little tumble, you see the perfection in that. And that's really um, the context to experience all of life in a way. It's rather than seeing things going wrong, it's thinking, well, actually, the infinite being is revealing things here. And if there's an openness just to reviewing them rather than believing things on a sort of face value, then new experiences can come through, new cognitions, and it can be, you know, more enriching, really.
Yeah, the feeling is as if you're for those who play music and you're reading a musical score,
Mm.
it's as if you're watching the reading the notes and you're playing the notes, and then there's the Adam is running and Adam is enjoying the weather and whatnot, and then there's a series of notes that is Adam is falling, but it's part of the score.
Yes.
And then
Yeah. Yeah.
you play that too. I mean, I used to be a
Yes.
trumpet player, which is why I'm doing that. But and it is that's what it felt like. It felt
Yes.
like there was that space had been created specifically for that fall, and it was absolutely meant to be and perfect. And the interesting thing, I mean, there's no pain in it at all. I just got up and kept running, but the whole thing felt like it was part of the musical score.
Fantastic. Well, it's fascinating with you, Adam, because lots of people, who work in the professions, the training is actually to create a sense of mind predominance. So it's the intellect's predominating. And I was interesting to know how you've maintained balance all along, but it makes a lot of sense that you've been a musician because mu music is arising within effortless being. So all the time you were practicing, as a musician, then you were aligning with your infinite nature and the the ability, to be able to play where you're kind of drawing on all the experience and the practice, but the effortlessness is coming through, and there's a sense of it just being perfect. When you just get it's a kind of you're sort of surfing the wave in a way, and that's when it becomes really magical. Um, but that accounts for a lot, actually. I'm sure there are other aspects of um, your background where um, aligning with effortless being is something, well, you were born with it actually, but also um, it's something which is, you've been able to experience it in the earlier stages of life. So there's a really good balance for you between effortless being, between the body of wisdom and the mental body. And that's the objective of everyone, really, for that integration.
Yeah, yeah. There's another something that I discussed also with my friend recently around this because I share with him a lot of these
Mm,
experiences that are happening to me, and that has to do with taking care of the body,
mm,
um, being quote unquote healthy,
yeah.
eating well, and exercising. Um, Thankfully, there was sort of a habit to being healthy
Yes.
before the awakening experience, and it seems like that just carried over, and it certainly helps to have my wife reinforce those healthy habits.
Mm,
um, and I wonder also if maybe you could speak to that, um, if those habits hadn't been there, and if my wife wouldn't ask me, um, there I don't know if there would arise a desire to run or to eat healthy.
mm,
It just seems like that arises naturally to take care of the body. But I imagine that for some, can imagine that for some with that level of awareness, especially those first few days in the hotel, there
mm.
was absolutely no desire to do anything other than sit and look
Yeah.
out the window.
Yeah. Well, you can say there can be integration of impersonal being um, on the level of the in the mental, the etheric, which is the emotional and the physical realms. What you find though is that if it's all being guided from effortless being, then the activities required to integrate, they appear before you and it becomes obvious. So if you take the days you spent in the hotel room, there was integration on a very subtle level there, and because it was very deep, um, it was more to do with integrating the mental and emotional realms into unity, and also just the opportunity. The infinite being gave you the opportunity just to be able to have the clarity of functioning um, from impersonal being without having to activate the mental and emotional and physical realms too much. So it was a really deep and clear experience you had there. But you find that with the the integration taking place in the different ways. So there's naturally the ability to um, for the mind, the emotions, and the body to be healthy. And you find that from effortless being, you find that whatever's required will come to you. And so things like, eating well, having exercise, the way we can create emotional balance in different ways. There are certain ways just keeping life quite simple. For instance, things like alcohol, recreational drugs, tiredness. Also, sexual energy is a big factor as well, which, lots of things that are spoken of in the older traditions are applicable. But it's just that those kind of activities will turbocharge the invitations.
It's
Um,
true. Yeah, you've said that before. I've noticed that to be true. I had I had a glass of wine probably a week or so after the
mm,
awakening episode, and it was quite a fascinating experience
yeah.
to notice how the senses dulled.
Yes.
There was sort of a hazy muffledness to the nature of awareness. There was still sort of an effortless awareness behind it all and present, but it did categorically change the nature of
Yes.
consciousness. And I did
Yes.
notice how that occurred. And also, you're right, invitations appear to be slightly more mm, attractive. Uh, well,
Yeah.
when I'm sleep deprived, uh,
Yes.
that seems to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good the way you describe things because having a drink where there's the ability to function from impersonal being, it isn't so much a personal experience there, and there is, as the way you describe it, there's impersonal awareness of dullness arising in the nervous system.
Yes,
But
exactly.
that's all it is. It isn't, we're not saying, "Oh, I'm tired, I feel frustrated," or it's a different experience, really. But it's good to know those aspects because keeping life quite simple. Um, I think that the way you describe it, you can. It's a kind of investigation in some ways, isn't it? Where there's impersonal being, then you can experiment and have certain experiences and just see the way they're handled. But you can really, the key is that the more integration there is in terms of functioning from impersonal being, and you realize impersonal being is being integrated into the personal mode. The way you were describing the car journey with your wife, that's integration of impersonal being into the personal mode. So there was the driving in the car happening, there were the two bodies sat in the vehicle, there was silence and the arising of the occasional conversation, which were just forms arising in the field. And that's really integration. You see the potential, and also the way you describe um, spending time with patients, because you're really showing up as the infinite impersonal being rather than showing up as Adam, and it's much more powerful and much more healing as well.
Yeah.
It's
Even right now in this moment, that awareness sort of all of a sudden got heightened for
great.
me, where there's um there's effortless awareness of now, and then
Mm.
there are two voices, David and Adam,
Mm.
arising in that field.
Fantastic.
Yeah. It is interesting how there are gradations to it.
Yes,
That
yes. There
is
can be
interesting.
clarity in the experience, but also there can be more intensity of unity and more
Intensity.
intensity of love as well.
That is very interesting. Yeah, and I don't quite understand the koshas. I have heard you talk about it, but it does provide some clarity because um, it helps me. And correct me if I have this right, but just understanding that there are these realms, if you will, of existence, to know that the bliss that arises in some of these moments, like right now, there's some bliss arising in the
Yes.
moment, and it's giving me the sense that intellectually, I know that that means I am in the bliss body. Correct me.
Yes.
Does that mean, is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yes. Yeah. That's great.
That is interesting. And it's good to know that there's a spectrum. There are moments where there's effortless awareness and it feels more neutral. Just a
Yeah.
simple like a simple neutrality of what is.
Yes.
And in other moments like now and sometimes running where there's a tremendous amount of bliss and love
Mm.
um, and it's just present.
Mm. And that's really the option which is becoming more available, really, which is where there's alignment with impersonal being and less venturing into the dualistic realm, then there's a kind of ascending quality in effortless being, which is the way you describe it, actually. So the foundation is neutrality, and then it can move into things like inspiration or intuition, and then it could be compassion, love, and then things like creativity, um, and then it moves into things like euphoria and bliss. So it's much more preferable, really, to experience the gradations existing in the unity of effortless being rather than venturing into the dualistic realm, because the dualistic realm is a different system, really. And it's much more turbulent and far less enjoyable.
That's wonderful. That should be a postcard, like a tourism postcard. Enjoy the gradations of effortless being. It's far more preferable. Yeah.
Definitely.
And your background is also quite the metaphor. Just pure white and then David arising.
Well, it's all quite simple, really. It's yeah, it's just amazing the way things work. I guess being, just very fortunate, following realization that effortless being started to guide things really clearly. So seeing that everything of value comes from effortless being, it just arises effortlessly. And being attentive to the things which come to us from nowhere, things which come effortlessly, rather than planning or striving or being engaged in the mental realm. And it does become magical then. It's really fascinating to see the way it's just being revealed to us.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different experience. It's almost like a lucid dream in a way. We're aware of the direction it's going, but it's the magic is in just enjoying the um the intelligence and the love which is structuring all of it. And even with the dualistic realm, um, it's enjoyable to experience the dualistic realm when it's being seen from impersonal being, because you can see the shenanigans of the dualistic realm. But it's just like a naughty child in a way, and it can be experienced much more like that rather than seeing it as some adversary or something, because it's only really an experience of contrast, and the structures of the dualistic realm do become quite predictable. It becomes quite easy to, in the way you've described, you wrote down the tendencies in the journal, and then you just spot them as soon as they're coming up. And
Yeah.
then, you see the way inversion works. You see that the invitations are always trying to conceal what they're trying to promote. So if there's something where you're being invited into anxiety or fear or something, it's usually that there's been a breakthrough in terms of more peace, silence, more alignment with impersonal being. But the dualistic realm doesn't want you to realize that, so it's inviting you back into a bit of turbulence.
Mm.
But when you know that, the invitations are actually like markers of progress because they only emerge in that way when you're making progress. Because it's like a little alarm going off in the dualistic realm and saying, "Oh, Adam's, moving into a much more deeply established experience of impersonal being. So we'll get somebody to give him some wine and see if we can get him more engaged in the dualistic realm."
Yeah. But what do you, for you, what do you notice about invitations? Over time, do they stop arising? Do they continue to arise? What's the experience?
Well, I think while the dualistic realm is still functional, there will continue to be some invitations. But in the way you describe them, it's very similar. I haven't used the analogy that you'd use of them just turning to ash before your eyes, but that's really how it is. Because there isn't, initially, because we've been conditioned to entertain them. So it's more like engaging with a bully, that it's more confrontational in the early stages because we've been engaging with the invitations. Gradually, you realize you don't need to engage with them. And it becomes something where you're just reading the energy. So you just sense that there's a feeling of contraction. And then eventually, the way you describe it, you see that they don't really have any substance. They only have the
Yeah.
substance that we give to them.
Yeah, yes. A phrase just popped into my mind. One of my favorite quotes from Shakespeare from The Tempest. He says, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind." And this is sort of feels it feels that way. It feels like this is an insubstantial pageant, like lots of colors and much to do about this, and this is important and that's important and you have to take action here, but it's all insubstantial. It's all
Yes.
like airy. Uh,
Yeah, that's
there's no substance to it.
yes, fantastic quotation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Shakespeare was onto something, I'm sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, and another one, he said, it's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
Yes.
That's this world.
Yes. That
Uh,
sounds like the demiurge.
yes, yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well,
Mm.
what a pleasure, David.
Yeah, great to meet you. And yeah, it's just so nice to see how much integration there is for you. The integration has been taking place over a long period of time, and that's why it is like the gapeless gate, that it appears as though there's a point of realization, but you see that the whole thing has been guided over your whole lifetime. Well, actually, from before then, really. But it's you're someone who has integrated um, the sort of professional aspect of your life experience in a way which at the moment is still quite rare. There are more people coming forward who have been involved in the professions, but in the early days, it tended to be more people who are either musicians and artists because it's easier. It's a shorter step in a way
Mm,
to this being from music or art than from the structures of academia. But it's great that you've conquered that.
yeah, it is interesting. Well, it is interesting. It doesn't feel like there's anyone working anymore.
That's great.
So in a way, it's like I was able to quit my job. I show up or the body shows up and somehow the whole day goes by and
Mhm.
everything gets done.
Yes, fantastic.
So that's lovely. I
That's
retired.
achievement. You've articulated the experiences, just so clearly. But and also your experiences are very advanced. It's quite interesting though the way sometimes a conversation like this can be a source of invitations to people because sometimes if people feel as though they haven't had quite such deep experiences, the invitations are saying, "Oh, we'll use this one to make it seem as though there's something missing for them."
Yes. Oh, it's true. I'm sure. I think comparison is a one of the most seductive invitations.
Yeah.
Because in a way, the dualistic central server is sort of getting you just in the moment of comparing, it's getting you to agree with the assumption that you are an individual
Yes.
with which someone else is being compared or to which someone else is being
Yes.
compared. It's a
Yes.
subtle assumption that just goes with the package and you don't even realize that you agreed to it. But the whole point is there's no one here to compare.
No, exactly.
There's no
And
one
you
here.
you see that fiction of personalization in the way you describe it, and then compare it to the unity that's there potentially, the way you describe the experience of the running and the falling and of the beating of the feet on the ground and just every aspect. And you just realize that comparison and duality, it's such a poor option really compared to unity.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I think there needs to be a postcard in, inviting one to the impersonal realm.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, it's great. It's a joke in a way because that's the only place we can ever be, really.
Yeah.
It's just we've invested a huge amount of energy in trying to maintain the opposite of that, which
Yeah.
is, personalization. It's a huge investment.
Yes, yes, it is.
But yeah, a lot of people are cashing that investment in now. It's great to know that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's amazing.
Well, thanks so much, Adam.
Thank you,
It's
David.
been wonderful
Thank
to
you.
meet you. And
Yeah. And I look
yeah,
forward to seeing you again on these group calls. It's really a joy that you set that up and it's such a pleasure. I feel there's joy for many reasons and for no reasons these days, but those group calls for you there's a lot of joy there and it's fun to be able to be there with others.
yeah, it's amazing the way it's developing. You can just sense that though, that there's something about the collective power really of those gatherings. And the way it emerged is quite interesting. There are a couple of people I've had conversations with, and they just really volunteered. But it seems like a new opportunity in some ways. So we'll have a lot of fun together, seeing where it's going to take us.
Yeah, let's see where it unfolds.